Dungeons & Dragons, one of my favorite tabletop games ever. I almost didn't end up sticking with it, but that's a story for another day. On the cover of the monster manual is a beholder, one of my favorite beasts in D&D. Traditionally, beholders seem to be depicted with red colors. One of the first times I ever had an opportunity to paint something like a beholder was actually an Tyrant model by Gale Force 9. It was the very first commission that I ever did, and it was for a good friend of mine. And I wanted to see how far I had come, so I went out and I repurchased the model. Now, I've been teasing this on other social medias for probably almost 2 years now. I think it's about time we cracked back in and did one. So this series is going to be a bit weird, and I'm going to be taking a lot of inspiration from Scott over at Miniature Maniac. Traditionally, with a tutorial like what you've seen here on the channel before, is going to have a lot more of me explaining what I'm doing and how you can do it as well at home. This video is going to mostly be about me trying to figure out how far I've come as a miniature painter. And as a result of that, this painting series is going to be a bit strange because it'll be a bouncing method back and forth between the base and the miniature itself until it's done. And I am going to make a video series all the way through until it's done, and I'm going to try to get my hands on the original one that I painted because I'm still friends with that guy, and we're going to compare the two between then and now. But without further ado, I've talked enough. Let's get in with the painting tutorial. Wow. We'll see what it turns into. I don't think it'll be much of a tutorial, but hopefully you guys learn something along the way. Starting off here, we used some Scavenge Blight Dinge just to kind of set the base tone, as I wasn't quite happy with how the primer had left everything. I end up using a mix of most of the paints in the pile next to you, and as I said, I would do my best to make sure I always put the bottle on camera at some point so that you knew which colors I would be using. I tried to do my best later on in the video to explain that the khaki color is similar to Screaming Skull. I don't think it reads very well, which is why I wanted to say something now. So we're just kind of gonna work all these colors into the stonework, and as you can see, I ended up with something pretty nice, and then I inevitably messed it up. So we'll cut back when that happens and I'll explain what happened.
So this is the stage where things started to go wrong. As you can see, I had a lot of great colors going on, really good fantasy base, but I just wasn't quite happy with all of those colors. Although it's nice to have that level of variation in a lot of other models, that I knew that Xanathar spends most of his time underground. He doesn't particularly care what his lair looks like as long as it's in good working order. So I'd imagine that he wouldn't have super bright and colorful stonework, so I wanted to dull and mute everything down. Unfortunately, by going with various levels of highlight here with the Wraithbone and the Ceramite White, it ended up just knocking things way too down to the point where it was actually bright. I wasn't knocking the color down anymore. I wasn't eliminating some of those dark vibrant blues or the bright khaki on the stone, and everything just kind of took this dull muted gray. And honestly, if I was going to stop somewhere, here's where I should have stopped. But as you can see in a moment, I end up deciding to put a wash on top of everything, and it just kind of bleeds out all of the color. And I kind of managed to save it in the end, but I wasn't super happy with how it's turned out. However, I know once I start adding weathering pigments and things like that, once everything is completely 100% said and done, once all the treasure and everything is painted and all of the weathering pigments get put on place, I know that I'll be a lot happier with where it is. I'm just not happy with it at the moment. This is one of those cases where I should have recognized that it looked good, set it down, walked away, and came back and looked at it later, and then decided for myself on whether or not I really wanted to darken things back down again. Right here, it is dried just enough where I've started to go into panic mode, and you can see me attempting to lightly wet blend original colors in with the wash that I've just applied across the surface with the contrast paint Skeletal Horde. And it kind of works in certain places, and in others it just kind of turns into a muddy color. And it didn't really help to fix anything. I can probably glaze back in some of that blue tone once everything is 100% dry, but I'll have to save that till much farther down the road, as I've put so much product on this at this point that I knew it would take forever to completely dry. So in this next clip, push forward another flaw, and I left it in because I wanted you guys to see what happened. Basically, you'll see me stippling with a paper towel trying to pull up some of the color, and although I do succeed a little bit, it doesn't add the texture that I was hoping it was going to. Honestly, when I realized my mistake, I should have, as soon as everything was still dry, where you can see me trying to pull some of the color back off with that large flat brush, that's when I should have done the stippling with the paper towel to try to soak off a lot of that color. And although, yeah, I could take some thinner from like an airbrush thinner and use that to try to get some of this color up, there is a good chance that I'll take it right down to the primer. And I really didn't want to. I really want to try to save what's there as opposed to just removing everything and starting over. So here you can see me adding some color back in using some of the various washes that I have, and this is where I feel I had my most redeeming features and where I kind of redeemed my mistakes here, and that is through these washes I'm able to bring some of the color back in. And again, those original base tones that I tried to lay down, I think I'll be able to pull those all back in once I start adding in the weathering pigments and everything completely at the end of everything. But again, I can't apply those now because we're not far enough in, and I know that they'll just get in the way and it'll make a big mess. So for now I just have to take things for their face value and hope and pray that everything turns out the way that I want it to in my head at the end of the day. But for right now, you can see I'm just going in and doing some final edge highlighting, and in a few places I do put Skeletal Horde back on top of some of the edge highlights where I've gone just a little too bright on the white. But I'm really happy with where things have ended up. Again, it's not quite as nice as I would have liked it, Again, I should have stopped much earlier on in this process, but that's a lesson learned. I know this was a short video compared to what maybe some of you were hoping for. I am taking this one step at a time because I love this model deeply and I don't want to mess it up. So, although this is where we're at with the stonework today, next we're probably going to need to start tackling the eye Tyrant, and once I can get it to a point where I feel comfortable calling it done, that's when we'll go ahead and we'll mount the acrylic rod in and finish doing all of the treasure as well as the green stuff work that's going to need to be done to finish this off. But for now, this is where we'll be leaving this week's video. Next week we're going to be starting in with some airbrushing and some dry brushing and everything else needed to start tackling the main body of the model. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please like it. If you thought this was interesting and want to see more stuff like this, please leave a comment to let me know that. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave those in the comment section as well. As always, thanks so much for joining us today, guys. I hope that your display case is always full and your pile of shame, much like mine, is always overflowing. See you in the next one, guys. Thank you so much for all the love and support.